Welcome back to Dreamseed VR. I'm your host, Sarah Finn, and this is episode 4, Aesthetic. So, yes, weekly we will have ridiculous costumes unless I am at the edge of death and I decide not to dress up. But here I am, being a goon for you, dressed up. So before we get into the thematic of this week's episode, we've got the news in VR, tech, psychedelics, and the arts. Now, this week, the arts are going to be particularly hefty and more so on the tip of recommendations as opposed to art news, but that's why this is aesthetics. So, to begin, our first news story this week is regarding the upcoming release of the game Cyberpunk 2077. Unfortunately, the game has been pushed back from its release date, which was set to be in April, and it's been pushed back to September. This isn't because the game isn't done, but rather they want to be thorough with their playtesting and make sure there aren't any bugs. But fans are actually quite happy that they're taking the time to make sure it's primed for release instead of pushing it out early. So be patient, it should be really cool, and fingers crossed everything goes smoothly, and September is our final release date for Cyberpunk 2077. In tech news, this past Sunday, Elon Musk's space rocket company, SpaceX, managed to pass a crucial safety test, proving that it can abort a mission after takeoff. It was delayed to the following day because of previously poor weather conditions, but Elon Musk said that he felt that the safety test was picture perfect and congratulated the respective teams on their dedication. A startup claims to be the world's first AR contacts. Mojo Vision, after extensive research, development, and testing, are excited to reveal their product plans and begin sharing details about their transformative platform, said Drew Perkins, a CEO at Mojo Vision. Mojo has a vision for invisible computing where you have information you want when you want it and not be bombarded or distracted by the data when you don't. The technology should be helpful and should be available in the moment and fade away when you want to focus on the world around you. The Mojo lens incorporates a number of breakthroughs and proprietary technologies, including the smallest and densest dynamic display ever made, the world's most powerful and efficient image sensor equipped with computer vision and a custom wireless radio, as well as motion sensors for eye tracking and image stabilization. It's not clear how far into the future we're looking for the actual retail product. However, Mojo Vision has raised over $100 million in investments so far and is led by a team which resumes spanning some heavy hitters in tech such as Apple, Amazon, HP, and Microsoft. In VR news, Oculus recently dropped the price of their Go headset to $150. This is an incredibly low price and will prove to be a move that makes VR more accessible to those who don't want to put down so much money on hardware. So we might be seeing more adopters because of this price drop. In more tech news, it looks like we have some juicy rumors having leaked regarding NVIDIA's upcoming RTX 3070, as well as the 3080. Now, there are quite a few specs that I don't really want to mumble through, so feel free to go check those stories out. It's also being covered by a number of other gaming sites and technology sites. So yeah, check it out. Someone leaked some juicy specs. Also in AR, VR news, it looks like Facebook has surged in the US patent rankings due to a mounting AR strategy. Now, it looks like an analysis of the US patents done by Fairview Research reveals that Facebook has made a significant surge in the past year-over-year ranking for patents granted in 2019. Today, the nonprofit, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, also known as MAPS, announced that for the U.S. Food and Drug Administration has agreed to MAPS' application for an expanded access program for MDMA-assisted psychotherapy for post-traumatic stress disorder. The purpose of the expanded access program is to allow early access to potentially beneficial investigational therapies for people facing serious or life-threatening conditions for whom currently available treatments have not worked and who are unable to participate in Phase 3 clinical trials. Congratulations, MAPS! So after our brief news cycle this week, I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into some recommendations, whether it's books, movies, or shows. So this week I'm going to start off with a little bit of some underground stuff. I wanted to share with you an incredible Etsy shop that I happened to come across based in Germany that makes really beautiful cyberpunk themed accessories and jewelry. So as you can see, I'm kind of rocking a less dystopian aesthetic this week. It's to demonstrate that genre and aesthetic go hand in hand regarding the tone of a society in science fiction. You'll notice that things that tend to be more dystopian are more grungy and a little bit darker in element and beat up, whereas sort of like the Jetsons or a shiny Apple future, less dystopian societies sometimes exhibit a more polished and shiny futuristic look. So this is my shiny early 2000s inspired futuristic look. In the art recommendations this week, we have some incredible artists, including the work of Heather Herman, who is a fusion artist between the Art Deco genre and Vaporwave. You can find her work at heatherherman.com. I personally find her work incredible, and I discovered it through a friend who saw her work at a cafe club in Vegas. So definitely go check out her work if you like fusions between Art Deco as well as Vaporwave. Another artist that we're going to be featuring this week is Alexa Foyer, very talented painter in Oakland, California, whose work is a fusion of the classical techniques of Renaissance painting and the futuristic aesthetics of cyberpunk and science fiction. Her work is transcendent. It's glowing and beautiful and dark and soulful. It's really incredible stuff. She's easily one of my favorite artists, and her work is dope. Check it out. Another artist that we're featuring this week is an artist from across the pond in the UK named Noelle Gard. Noelle is a painter as well as an illustrator whose work is highly detailed and beautiful renditions of various cybernetic beings. He has an incredible grasp of line work as well as color, and I'm totally in love with the cyborg babes that he illustrates. Another featured artist this week is the work of Julian Louv. Julian is a tattoo artist whose work blends psychedelic surrealism as well as elements of sci-fi. He has a penchant for illustrating really beautiful eyes that I feel like have a manga influence. His work is not only incredibly precise and beautiful regarding line work, but he has a very psychedelic and trippy sense of color as well as how the psychedelic meets the digital. So I would check out his work if you're interested in finding a unique and surreal artist regarding body work. And yeah, Julian Louv, tattoo artist. This week, the two movie recommendations I have for you are actually shows, and they're both examples of Japanese animation, colloquially known as anime. Now, before I mention these, I do want to point out that though they're animated series, that I do recommend them to people who typically wouldn't watch animated films. These are both really interesting plots. They have a lot of cyberpunk sensibilities, although they are set in a near future. So they're not deep future cyberpunk, but they both are revolving around the integration of technology on a social level with younger people in Japan. The first of which is Serial Experiments Lane. For me, this is a personal classic. It's very strange and surreal, and it's a little dark without being dark in palette, and it's not quite morbid, but it's strange. It's sort of kind of like if a little girl were in the Matrix. That's about as far as I want to go without spoiling it, but it revolves around the main character, Lane, and her tumbling down a sort of digital rabbit hole regarding the underground of Tokyo, as well as the nature of reality in both the digital and the real world. So there, Serial Experiments Lane. It's considered a modern classic of anime. And the second anime recommendation I have for you this week is called Den-O Coil. Now, I haven't personally gotten very far into Den-O Coil yet. I'm still digesting it, but it has lots of references to augmented reality's application in social life, as well as how that affects the reality of younger people. So if you're interested in how contemporary cinema and filmmaking is going to be integrating these concepts alongside how we in our real lives integrate them, I would check out Den Coil. It's got a nice contemporary style. It's not super hardcore cyberpunk aesthetically, but conceptually it's right on point. So that one's called Den Coil. One of this week's book recommendations includes David J. Brown's Dreaming Wide Awake. This is an amazing book that is not only psychedelic in sensibilities, but it's also a primer helping the reader dive into the history of dreaming, both shamanic and culturally, and it covers several different techniques for how you, the reader, might start your journey into lucid dreaming. It's very comprehensive. It's got a lot of really great reviews, including Rick Strassman, who's the author of DMT, the Spirit Molecule, and James Fadiman, who is a microdose researcher and author of Psychedelic Explorer's Guide. They both have wonderful things to say about this. David J. Brown is a talented interviewer and researcher in the field, and this book is an excellent introduction into how you can start expanding your experience with lucid dreaming. He's also teaching a workshop in Vegas at the end of this month through McBride's School of Magic. So, yep, Dreaming Wide Awake by David J. Brown. The other book recommendation that we have this week for you is a Philip K. Dick novel, The Three Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch. This is a strange one because it has multiple themes regarding a psychedelic drug called candy, which transports the users to a sort of little make-believe world that they create with little dolls and such while they live their sad lives on a Martian colony. So in that way, there's simulated realities as well as a drug that aids them in their transcendence into that tiny little world. I'm currently reading this one. I haven't quite finished it yet, but I've been looking forward to it for a number of years because of that overlapping theme and sort of my own personal research into the fictional overlap of illicit drug use and VR. So even though it's not a technological VR, it's still a simulated virtual reality. And in particular, I wanted to explore this because there is a theme between people wanting to escape their world and falling into an addictive cycle with drugs as well as simulated realities, whether the analog of that is video game use in the contemporary world, or as in this, it's people escaping their sad lives on a desolate Martian colony. So this one is the Three Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch by Philip K. Dick. Plus it matches my outfit. Our other book recommendation this week comes to us from, I don't even know. This is intense. This is Luigi Serafini. This is the Codex Seraphinianus. This is a huge book. It's completely surreal and absurd. It's kind of like an encyclopedia from another dimension. Now, it has much more to do with surrealism and potentially psychedelics than it does anything regarding virtual reality, but I still wanted to recommend it because it is a treasure trove of visual inspiration that's completely surreal and weird. It's written in a language that is sort of undecipherable, and in that way, I can't help but feel like it's related to the Voynich manuscript, which Terence McKenna spent a lot of time thinking about and analyzing, as well as other sort of ischemic writing books that don't quite have a translation, but are inspirational in a xenolinguistic kind of way. So if you remember the prefix xeno meaning alien, when we use the word xenolinguistics, we're referring to languages that aren't written by human beings. And this could refer to things that are channeled or potentially imagined if they don't have a translatable origin. And they could also refer to linguistic structures that are created by animals or aliens or other life forms that are non-human. Now that we're talking about aesthetics, let's dive a little bit into some free-form thoughts about them. In general, when we look at sci-fi, There tends to be a dualistic binary between what's considered a utopic future and a dystopic future. And oftentimes these signals are given to us cinematically or narratively through the aesthetic of the society. Oftentimes you look at a utopian society, you'll see lots of people who are in a clean, well-organized society, whose clothes aren't tattered, and who in general seem to be living a happy Jetsons kind of existence. Whereas in a dystopian society, you often see a sort of degradation of cultural aesthetic. You see lots of dirty cityscapes, breaking down infrastructure, crumbling artifices, as well as a people who have a general attitude of defeat and whose clothes are in need of mending. If you look at such films as Blade Runner, you'll see it's incredibly dystopic with society on Earth crumbling, whereas society is putting most of its progressive investments in the off-world colonies. And in an example of a utopian film, which actually turns out to be quite dystopian, in the classic Logan's Run, you see a future where everybody's wearing shiny new clothes, all of the infrastructure of the city is gleaming and well kept, and in general, all of the citizens seem to be in a well-balanced and happy mental state, not really questioning the world around them and feeling well taken care of by the society. Now, the reason I bring this up is because in this way, aesthetic is a symbolic representation of the state of society. Also regarding aesthetic, when you look at the way human beings have fashioned their clothes, as well as in transhumanist terms, the way that we fashion ourselves, these elements will play a major role in how we build ourselves in the future. Now, in particular, I chose to embody this outfit this week to put an emphasis on eyeliner and lashes. The reason I chose to do this was I was recently inspired revisiting the beginning of Snow Crash regarding an avatar off the shelf from Walmart called a Brandy. Now, in the world of Snow Crash, there are individuals who don't have customized avatars as they're kind of expensive, and so they opt for an off-the-shelf Brandy. The funny thing about Brandy avatars is they tend to have really big, chunky, pixelated eyelashes. Now, the reason I found this amusing is because in modern society, eyelashes have become more and more popular as a way to draw attention to the feminine quality of the eye. I find this ironic because in a way it is what we would call a superstimuli. Superstimuli is much the way that red lips denote flushing, which is a sexualized attractive thing. The same with eyelashes tend to denote an abstract exaggeration of fertility and femininity. There's a joke in design that when you want to denote femininity, just give it some eyelashes and throw a bow on it. Now, the reason I bring this up is because in a transhumanist near future, we will be designing ourselves on ever more thorough levels. So not just gluing artificial things to our eyelashes, but we'll also be augmenting our genome and our bodies to more fit the visions that we have for ourselves internally and what we want to throw signal-wise to the world around us. And so when we look at those qualities, it's important to understand that when we make certain aesthetic choices, we're actually defaulting to a set of representational signals that society has deemed what we want to embody as our identity. So when this comes to femininity, that's the reason why cosmetic surgery has become even more and more popular over the past several decades regarding rhinoplasty, breast augmentation, and even booty implants. That's right. Some of you might already be aware that there is a Brazilian butt lift and that there's also booty implants. Some of you have been living under a rock and are unaware that, there's such a thing as a Kardashian ass, but it's true. Why are people drawn to those things? Typically, it's because they want to embody ideals, and those ideals are symbolic representations of certain qualities, whether it's fertility or gender roles or just general attractiveness of blood flushing the lips. So when we think about aesthetics and how they impact our perception of not only the individual, but the state of a society, it's important to look at how we fictionally embed those narrative devices in the stories that we tell, especially when it comes to whether or not we are illustrating a dystopia or a utopia. Oftentimes in cyberpunk film, there is a sort of gritty romanticism to the struggle that we see in societies that are dealing with revolutionary turmoil in cyberpunk. And so we look at characters with their gritty leather jackets and their studded things and their grease smeared faces on their cyber motorcycles, and we think, that's badass, that's masculine, that's strong, or that's revolutionary. Whereas oftentimes we'll look at a utopian society, and even though it looks placid and potentially serene on the surface, it might actually be a symbol of an authoritarian society, such as we see in a movie called The Giver. Now, you might not realize that The Giver is actually pretty cyberpunk. Why? Because it's actually about a young man who has come to realize that his utopia is not as it seems, and he's striving to return himself as well as the person he cares about, a little baby named Gabriel, to a simpler life, a pastoral existence where the state doesn't control their autonomy and free will. So basically, aesthetic throws signal regarding the individual's identity and the state of a society. And so it's important to look below the surface and see what the nature and context of those signals are. Now, I have a few additional blasts of irony for you regarding aesthetics. Now, you might have noticed I forgot one of my accessories for the earlier part of the broadcast, and that's fine. I wasn't wearing this cute little necklace I had made. The irony about this necklace is that things like this have become more and more popular in fashion accessories over the past couple of years. And the reality is that these accessories tend to come from a cultural influence from BDSM and the kink community. Now, regardless of whether or not people who choose to wear these things are actually kinky or part of the BDSM community is really aside the point. And the point is that these accessories have just become trendy. They've become cool. People like them on an aesthetic level. And why do they like them on an aesthetic level? Do they like them because they look sleek or they look badass? Or do they like them because they look bondagey or they look edgy? Or they look like maybe they are subby when they wear them? This is all going to come down to the individual's interpretation of wearing that garment. But I find it funny because it falls into a similar category as the other things that we've been talking about. When you have something that has become in vogue or in fashion that's throwing a signal that may or may not be something the wearer is completely aware of or necessarily buying into ideologically. The same thing happens when we choose to dress ourselves in regards to the roles and the aspirations that we have. For every point in history, there are fashions and trends and ideologies that are quietly implied by the garments that we wear. If you look at the classic beauties, there was definitely a time when to wear a tux or a suit to a Parisian hotel was super risque, and it was violating social norms, and those actions definitely define the character of the people who choose to do that, as well as the social nature of the time and how we as a society choose to evolve. So as we go into the future and we choose to adorn ourselves with different things, we are throwing signals about the people we want to be. We're throwing signals about our ideologies and our value sets. And we're also throwing signals about whether or not we are hip or naive to that awareness. Now, this is a silly little thing that I made as a prop for this shoot to make that point. I personally do like edgy styles, obviously, but I'm also a very spunky, free-willed young lady that don't want nobody controlling her. So it's kind of a sense of irony that I would wear something that looks like it's meant to bind a person or control them or hold them on a leash. But what's funny is that it comes off really easily. It's not real at all. It's just a symbol of edginess. It's a symbol of archaic control, right? So how do we wear these things? How do they function? Are they symbolic? Are they practical? Do they actually have an effect on the way we live our lives? Do they have an effect on the way people perceive us? And are those perceptions things that we want to foster in other people? Or is it just playful and fun? What do these signals mean? And ultimately, that's the reason why I wanted to explore this theme. I wanted us to tap into a deeper awareness of what symbol, representation, practicality, and signal really mean as we choose our identities and ourselves and build who we are in a transhumanist future. Was that nerdy enough for you? Thanks again for watching this week, and if you like and enjoy what I do, please feel free to subscribe and follow us as we archive our stuff on dreamseedvr.com, as well as support us at Patreon. It's patreon.com/Sarah Finn. And thank you again. I'll see you all next week.